we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
Despite constitutional guarantees, American civil rights and liberties are constantly in danger of violation, whether by individuals, corporations, or government institutions. Regardless of whether personal prejudices or national security concerns lie at the root of these violations, challenging them and holding wrongdoers accountable is imperative for the sake of the constitutional integrity and the preservation of the American way. Trial lawyers advocate for awareness, the truth, and a person's right to know. They believe that in the absence of the truth, all of us stand helpless to defend ourselves, our families, our health, and our way of life. Oftentimes, we don't think about or worry about or understand what is happening to another until it happens to us. Deceits have no boundaries. Disease doesn't recognize the color of our skin or our political party's affiliation. When it comes to cover-ups and false allegations by agencies of the state and the federal government, there is not a soul amongst us who does not have a cringing fear of their overwhelming, awesome power. It is at these times that we need experienced and dedicated trial lawyers, the warriors in the courtroom, who are willing to battle for us tooth and nail in the halls of justice to protect our cherished way of life.
Arnold Reed is one of these experienced and dedicated trial lawyers who successfully represented the family of Ernest Griglen when he was savagely beaten by Dearborn, Michigan police officers on the Southfield Freeway. According to one witness who was a passerby, he was rushed to the hospital where he remained in a coma for nearly a month and later died from the police beating. Now, for the first time on national TV, that passerby witness will tell exactly what she saw.
I remember I was on my way to church that day and I saw the police brutally beating a man on the side of the road. Never saw this man before, just remember, oh my gosh, he looks like he's about to die. The way that they were countlessly, just senselessly beating him over and over and over. He was not resisting, he was laid on the ground and they were just over and over kicking him and punching him in the head throughout his whole body. What I thought when I saw this was, okay, I have a path to go down. I either say something or I don't say something. And I just thought, you know, if it were my family member, if it were me, I would definitely want somebody to speak up. And I was conflicted. I felt, you know, it's the police. What can I do against them? Those are the people you call for help. And here they are hurting someone who wasn't fighting back, who wasn't resisting. So it gave me the impression of, what do? I had a crossroad and I chose to say something. I chose to speak up and speak for what was right. There are people who question whether or not I should say something, question whether or not it would make a difference. I felt like that too. I felt like I was at a crossroads. I had a choice to make, you know, would it make a difference? Would it matter? Would anything change? And I thought about it, I prayed about it, I sat on it for a little while and just pondered. But at the end of the day, I definitely felt like it was something I had to step up and speak to. It was something that if I were in that situation, if I had, you know, one person who could be a lifeline for me, I would want them to speak up for me. So that's what I did for him. As an African American, I've seen over the years where police officers will just take it into their own account to beat people senselessly for no reason, guilty or not, before they even know the situation that's going on. So I would suggest to other African Americans to be steadfast, listen to whatever they're telling you to do in that moment, but also keep in mind that this could be a life or death situation. It could turn, you know, either way in the blink of an eye. I understand that my testimony brought justice to Mr. Griglen's case, And I would suggest that anybody that's in that situation to do that. If I had the opportunity, I would definitely do it again. I don't have any regrets, and I'm very glad that I stepped forward.
Police abuse remains one of the most serious and divisive human rights violations in the United States today. The horrific images of Rodney King being beat by the LAPD is one of the most blatant reminders of police brutality against innocent victims. The excessive use of force by police officers, including unjustified shootings, severe beatings, and fatal chokings, persists because overwhelming barriers to accountability make it possible for officers who commit human rights violations to escape due punishment and often to repeat their offenses. Police and public officials greet each new report of brutality with denials or explain that the act was just an aberration, while the administrative and criminal systems that should deter these abuses by holding officers accountable instead virtually guarantee them impunity. The special insider exclusive investigation discovered that police brutality is persistent and rampant across America, and that systems to deal with abuse have failed, and that victims seeking redress face daunting obstacles at every point in the process, ranging from overt intimidation to the reluctance of local and federal prosecutors to take on brutality cases of officers who have committed these human rights violations. Despite claims to the contrary from city officials where abuses have become scandals in the media, efforts to make meaningful reforms have fallen short. The barriers to accountability are remarkably similar from city to city. Shortcomings in recruitment, training, and management are common to all. So is the fact that officers who repeatedly commit human rights violations tend to be a small minority who taint entire police departments but are protected routinely by the silence of their fellow officers and by flawed systems of reporting, oversight, and accountability.
In this insider exclusive network TV special, Black Lives Matter, Ernest Griglen's story, our news team visits with Arnold Reed, the Arnold Reed and Associates law firm, and that special Good Samaritan witness, Shania Spears, on location in Detroit, Michigan, to share how he successfully settled this case within 6 months from the lawsuit filing for $1.4 million. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Detroit, Michigan. It is my great pleasure to introduce Arnold Reed to the show. Welcome to the show, Arnold.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What type of law do you practice?
Well, we've been in business since roughly May of 1993. Traditionally, we've been a high-profile criminal firm. We have done personal injury, wrongful death, medical malpractice, police misconduct. Those are our big areas, and we do a lot of high-profile cases, but we represent the little guy too. So it kind of varies between those 3 or 4 different areas.
When you were in law school, did you decide that you were going to represent the little guy then, or what made you go that direction?
Wow, no. When I was in 6th grade, I decided I was going to be a lawyer because a friend of mine and myself were walking to school. The police pulled up on us, grabbed us at gunpoint, threw us in a car, took us around to this guy's home. An older white gentleman is walking down his porch, and the cops say, "These are the ones, right?" He looks in the window, goes, "No, they're not yet. They're the ones, this one," and he's pointing to me with the green jacket on, right? It's him. He said, "These are babies. They didn't rob me. I told you grown men robbed me." They kicked us out of the scout car, books all over the street and everything. And it was from that day that I vowed that that would never happen to me again. And if I could prevent that from happening to me, I was going to do it. And that was when I first realized the power of a police officer, the power of law enforcement. And that was my impetus to go to law school.
Wow, that's
That was a very momentous time for you then, wasn't it?
It's no question. And this is, you know, back in the 70s where these kinds of things were happening. And if you can imagine, if I had went to jail for something I didn't do, Steve, I wouldn't be talking to you now.
Well, it's a good thing you are.
Indeed.
Well, let's talk about this case that we're here about today. Ernest Griglen. Who was Ernest?
Ernest was a very gentle man. He was a family man, a great father, a great husband. He worked all his life. Unfortunately, he became afflicted with diabetes. And as his diabetes progressed, he had to get an amputation, for example. His leg was amputated above his ankle. So he had a lot of problems. He had a diabetic pump, but he still could live relatively a normal life. He had a diabetic boot. He cut the grass. I mean, he did things around the house. He became a tinkerer, but the kids loved him, married for over 25, 30 years, never been in trouble before, just a first-class kind of guy.
And what happened?
He's driving down the freeway one day in June back in 2008. He had just dropped his wife off at the mall. She went in to go do some shopping, watch a movie. He was going to come back and get her. As he's driving down the Southfield Freeway in a northerly direction, he begins to experience a diabetic episode. He becomes hypoglycemic. And so he starts waving back and forth from lane to lane. Somebody calls the police. They get behind him. They pull him over. They walk up to his car, and by this time, Ernest is a little incoherent. They mistake him for being someone who's intoxicated. They ask him to get out of the car. They have to ask him maybe 2 or 3 times. When they get Ernest out of the car, Ernest naturally, he was about maybe 6 feet, 200 and maybe 30, 40 pounds. So he's not a little guy, but not menacing by any stretch of the imagination. They eventually get him out of the car. He begins to reach onto his right side because he has a diabetic pump. When he reaches for the diabetic pump, the Dearborn police claim that they said he was reaching for a weapon, Steve. I mean, a diabetic pump about the size of a pager, right? I don't think so. They beat Ernest out there. They kicked him. They slammed him to the pavement and caused a closed head injury. He lingered for about 15 to 20 days in Oakwood Hospital, and then he died. It was a shame. Before there was a Trayvon Martin, before there was a Freddie Gray, before there was a George Floyd, Steve, there was an Ernest Griglen.
Now, this case really was helped along by a Good Samaritan passerby who witnessed all this, because often in these cases, it's the police's word against somebody who's in a coma, who nobody saw what happened, right? Exactly. Tell our audience a little bit about it. We're going to have her on here, Shania Spears, right? We're going to have her on in a little bit, but tell our audience a little bit about how she happened to see this. She was going by, but more importantly, why she came forward.
Here's the kind of brief backstory on that. You're exactly right. These cases rise and fall on who's seen what, as we all know. I didn't have anybody who'd seen anything. Ernest was incapacitated, his wife was at the mall, and he was in the car alone. Out of the blue, as I'm walking literally around the office having a fit about, I don't have a witness, right? Out of the blue, Steve, I get this phone call, right? And it's Miss Spears. I pick up the phone, she says, I saw you on television, because this was highly publicized. And I said, you saw me on television for what? She said, you know, the guy that got beat on the freeway, I was driving by at the same time that he was getting beat. Steve, I couldn't believe it. I'm saying to myself, yeah, okay, right. I said, well, tell me what happened. What did you see? Was he black or white? Knowing full well he's African-American. So I'm kind of, baiting her on a little bit to see if this is legit, right? Because this is a deal breaker for me. I said, what kind of car was he driving? She said it was a Cadillac. And I said, what color was the car? And she told me. I believe it was green, she said. And she gave me so many specific details, it freaked me out. I told her, hold on. I didn't even want to run back and look in the file, Steve. I immediately called Griglen's wife. And she picks up the phone. What kind of car did Ernest have again? Tell me. I'm just so excited now, right? I'm beside myself. I have a witness. She said, Ernest has a Cadillac. I said, what color was it, Pam? She said it was green. Jackpot. Jackpot, right? I have a witness. And jurors believe independent witnesses. Here we were. She didn't have a dog in the hunt. I didn't know her at that time. She didn't know Mr. Griglen. She didn't know any of the police officers. She was just driving by the scene. And there we had it. We had that missing piece.
In your many years of lawyering, how many times have you had somebody come out of the blue and make a case for you?
That was probably the second time in 25 years. And when it happens, I mean, it's beautiful. I had one situation where I was suing a major company for discrimination, right? And I was going to take the deposition of one of the targets who was a manager. I got a letter in the mail saying, Mr. Reed, you're taking a deposition of so-and-so. He can't read. So I'm sitting in the deposition, right, the next day, and I asked this guy some questions. I started to end the deposition, Steve, because I'm like, oh, I'm not paying attention to that anonymous letter I got. So I said to the guy, you're a supervisor. Yeah, I am. And it's important that you know how to read. Yeah, because you operate press machines and people under you operate press machines. And sometimes you have to stick your hand in the press, isn't that right, to fix it. And if you can't read the directions, somebody could get an arm taken off. I had the manual, Steve, the instructions on how to stop the machine. I handed him the instruction manual. I said, read this. He couldn't read. He couldn't read. So Miss Spears was the second time in 30 years. That was the first. And I'll probably, in the rest of my career, never get something like that again. But those are the two times.
Now, you eventually filed a case on behalf of the widow. And what happened?
We filed a lawsuit, and it was very, very contentious because there were maybe 8 or 9 officers because 2 precincts showed up, so to speak. One was Allen Park, one was Dearborn. And it was difficult because Dearborn had no cameras in the car. And the reason they didn't have cameras is because 2 years earlier, I sued them and they had cameras in the car and they recorded a young man swallowing cocaine and they laughed at him and made fun. Instead of taking him to jail, to the hospital, they took him to jail and he died in the precinct. So they took the cameras out of the car. So here we have poor Mr. Griglen. Because of the efforts in beating them a couple of years previous, there was no video of it. There was no body cam of it. So here we were in the middle or starting this lawsuit again without nothing until Ms. Spears came. So we filed a lawsuit. It was very contentious, a lot of discovery back and forth. We took numerous depositions. And then finally, they came to their senses and we resolved the case.
Resolved it for how much money?
$1.4 million.
You know, in cases like this, when you have a good Samaritan, passerby, a witness, come forward, the other side is going to attack them, right?
No question.
And what did they do?
They did everything that they could. They tried to make it out like you really didn't see. How fast were you going? What direction were you going? They were doing everything they could.
Looked into her background?
The whole 9. To make sure or try to make her credibility look bad. Make her look like she's a liar, in other words, right? But she nailed everything right on the head. She knew between what the cross streets on the freeway were. She nailed it down. She knew what time of day it was. And after that, they saw that this woman hadn't killed anybody, hadn't stolen anything from anyone, that she was a good person and would make an excellent presentation in front of a jury, and they caved. They came to court, and they told the judge, we've got significant money. And the first offer was like $1 million. And, of course, I said, that's not significant at all. Then it came up to 1.2. That's nothing. So we had an adjournment. So it's one of those situations where I walk out of the courtroom, I turn down $1.2 million, and And I'm saying to myself, I don't know if that was admirable or stupid. Okay, you turned down 1.2 mil. Ernest didn't have any economic damages because he hadn't worked due to the diabetes. So he was getting Social Security. So I couldn't claim wage loss, right? He hadn't worked in years. And so I walk out of the courtroom saying, oh my God, hold on. They kept coming up. And so they came to 1.4, and the family said, okay, that's good. We want to settle. We don't want to go through this anymore. It was hard for him, Steve. The memory of Ernest, it was hard.
Well, congratulations on that. You know, very fortunate. And we have with us Shania right now. So let's bring her on. It is my great pleasure to introduce Shania Spears. Welcome to the show, Shania.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. You are such an unusual person. You're a good Samaritan in my book, and I'm sure in Arnold's book. Most people, when they see, especially cops beating up people, you know, they don't want to get involved. Most people don't want to get involved when they see anything, right? What made you come forward and help out here?
I think it was definitely a shock to see what was going on, especially in this day and age. It reminded me of something that you would see in previous America, even though it still happens now, someone being beaten on the side of the road. And because it weighed so heavy on my heartstrings, I had to come forward and say something.
What exactly did you see these cops doing?
Yeah, I saw them brutally beating a man who was not resisting, was not fighting back, and he just looked so helpless.
Was he on the ground and they were still kicking him and beating him?
He was. So as he was laying face down on the ground, they just kept hitting him and kicking him, hitting him in the head. It was just relentless.
You saw Arnold on TV and you made that phone call. Did anybody in your family say to you, why do you want to get involved?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what did they say to you?
Why get involved? Nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to happen. You know, it's just going to be another, you know, you give your testimony as far as what happened and nothing goes better. Nothing gets better from there.
Right, but you still went forward.
Absolutely. It weighed very heavy and I had to say something.
Now, you were obviously deposed. And you had a taste of justice firsthand, meaning they tried to attack you, right? They tried to attack your credibility. What did they say to you?
Just asked a lot of questions and asking, you know, have I lied before? You know, have I ever been in trouble before? The answer was no to all of those things. And just really tried to attack what my credibility was, who I am as a person and my character.
What do you have to say to everybody on national TV about when they witness crimes that are being committed, whether by the police or whatever? What should they do?
Absolutely come forth. I mean, at the end of the day, that's somebody's family member. When something is happening, you would want that same respect from someone else to do that for you. So just to be honest and step forward, tell what you saw, and hope for the best. I definitely am a true believer in that.
Okay. Was there any kind of after effects as you came forward? Did people contact you at your home, bother you? Were there people that complimented you, criticized you? What were some of those?
Yeah, more so complimenting. I didn't get any backlash from anyone, but more so, thank you. You know, I really appreciate it. I was told that I was brave. And at the end of the day, I didn't see it as being brave. It was just something that should have happened, something that I had to do based on what I saw. You know, it was just second nature. There was a little bit of hesitation in the beginning, but definitely at the end of the day, if it were me or someone that I loved, I would want someone to come forth and say what they saw.
Well, you're a godsend, you know, and thank you for doing what you were doing. You made the case. Because as Arnold was saying, he needed somebody, something, right? Because oftentimes, you know, in these cases, it's the police words which the public has a tendency to believe. You know, I mean, most cops are good cops. I mean, thank God there are police. But there are those bad ones, you know, that taint the whole department. And I want to thank you very much for being on the show and doing what you did.
Thank you so much.
You know, Arnold, because you are a very visible attorney that have handled a lot of high-profile cases, you must get a lot of calls from people to represent them. So I'd like to know, the audience would like to know, how you decide what cases to handle.
Well, the way that I do it is when the person calls me, right, I listen to everything that they say. And then I have them repeat their story again, and then I listen again, right? And I don't necessarily make a decision based on whether this is a high-profile case or not. It's whether I think that I can help them. For example, I recently got a phone call. This was all over the news about the young lady here in Michigan who was jailed by the judge for not doing her homework. That was in conjunction with the Black Lives Matter movement. There were numerous protests. The judge put this young lady in jail.
How old was she?
She was 14 years old, put her in jail. And I got a call from the mom, and the mom wanted me to come in and represent her. I decided that it probably wasn't a good idea for our firm to jump in that case because the case had already been going on. So we make our decisions based on a number of factors. Can we help the person? Can we get the person justice, as corny as that sounds? But my favorite case is Lady Justice is supposed to have this blindfold, which signifies justice being blind. That's crap. That's crap, right? When we get a case where Lady Justice takes her blindfold off and peeks right in the face of that defendant, that's the case I want. Because I want to take that case, take that blindfold, and wrap it right back on Lady Justice's face and keep justice blind. That's the kind of case I want.
Well, again, congratulations and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.